Ladies, very nice ladies and gentlemen and guests. I'd like to welcome quite a number of guests. I'm not quite sure how each of you all have heard about the club, but you are very welcome, and I hope you enjoy your evening. I would also like to just say the club has had a very busy month. We have a training day, which was hosted by John Lund, who isn't here this evening, I can see, which was very successful. That was followed by a sale, a 2-day sale at Ryedale last weekend, followed by Thornton Show yesterday. I hope those of you who were selling feel flushed tonight, because the club did very well on both occasions. We will be having another sale in November. Tonight, we're welcoming Darren who's come all the way from Norfolk.
No, Suffolk. I'll let you off. I'm actually from Norfolk. I now live in Suffolk, so I'll let you off. East Anglia, yes, safe bet.
A long way down. You've been before, we enjoyed it before. I'm sure we'll enjoy it this time as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Darren, please.
Thank you. I'm about to get mic'd up. So.
Just keep these up then.
Yep.
Flip it on.
And the back first. Just got to remember to turn it off if I go to the toilet, because every time I do Zoom demos at home, I'm sitting there having a wee, and someone says, "We can hear you, Darren." Right. Well, it's great to be back in Yorkshire. I am from Norfolk. I now live in Suffolk. I live in Lowestoft. I'm the UK's most easterly turner, I think, because if there's anybody further east than me, they've got wet feet. I do have connections to Yorkshire. My father or grandfather was a Yorkshireman. My mother was born in Bridlington. I can't remember where my grandfather was born. Just west of Scarborough somewhere. I can never remember the name of it. So I do have an affinity to Yorkshire, and it's nice to be back here. So thank you for inviting me. Bought 3 pieces of my work in. Those that have seen me before know my work. Basically, I tend to turn coloured and texture things, anything up to about 6'6" length planks, spinning around like aircraft propellers, and some idiot stands in front of it with a sharp piece of metal, taking lumps out. So imagine a 6-foot plank spinning around, literally like an aircraft propeller. I have got loads of videos ready or waiting to go on YouTube. There's a few of me on YouTube, a couple on Facebook. I've done one a couple of weeks ago, just a couple of short clips, a piece of oak about that long, but I turned it off center. So basically it was off the lathe, sitting out this side, so like a one-bladed propeller. And that wasn't very safe, so I made some outriggers with 2 kilos of lead on it just to try and get it balanced. Put some pictures of it on Facebook, a little video, and then the world sort of ignited, saying that I was crazy, I was going to lose my legs, my arms, rest of my body. And I was putting wood turning in disrepute by doing stuff that's dangerous. I'm still here, and I've still got all my fingers, and I have actually got proper shoes on tonight, because most of the time I turn in flip-flops, and I keep getting told off, especially when on Zoom, people suddenly sort of walk back and I'm turning flip-flops, and I've got big planks of wood going on. And I say, if it comes off, I'll break your toes. If that comes off, the last thing I'm worried about is my fucking toes. So I've just come back. Did anybody go to the wood turning weekender down at Swindon?
No.
No? You missed an absolute treat. That I was one of the demonstrators. And that's the first time I've done one of the Woodturner Weekenders. That's Chestnut Products event. He asked me if I'd do it. I didn't know how good it was going to be, but he said he was going to pay me. So I thought, well, any money in the pocket's better than nothing. So I went and done it. It was actually a really good event. And if he does it again next year, I'll go just as a paying punter because it was that good. And I don't normally spend much money. I think that's where the Yorkshire bit comes from. So basically, when I was down there, this is the actual one I done in the demo. A bit different to being here. When I was there was a stage with about 500-600 people all watching me. And basically, we all know that all you want us demonstrators to do is to make a massive bit of wood come off the lathe and stuff. So basically, it's a textured bowl using the rainbow waxes. There's 3 or 4 different colours of the rainbow wax. I did forget one of the colours. Somebody in the audience asked a question, so I'll shove it down this end. You can have a look. A bit of texturing on the back. That went down really well, so I thought, well, I'll try and do one of those tonight. So I'm going to use a piece of sycamore, 2 inches by roughly 12 inch. My go-to method for holding a piece of wood in the first place is basically an Axminster screw chuck. I normally use my own chuck, but when I got to the hotel, the travel lodge, suddenly remembered that you guys have got a Nova and my chuck won't fit on it. This is the one my chuck that I normally use. Apparently they are also available in silver, but you can see why I try and use my chuck because I end up covering in paint and things. I have got a well-travelled bin bag which I'll put over the lathe when I do any colouring. This sycamore has probably got to be some of the world's most travelled sycamore. And we'll just come loose. My usual supplier is about 15-20 miles away from me. I went to see him because he had a load of sycamore they brought over from Germany. And I think this is some of it, ash and sycamore they had brought over. It's all over kiln dried. So basically they heat it too much. I think probably because they were going to use it for furniture in Germany. So the wood's a little bit dry, a little bit brittly, but it'll be all right for a demo. And I went to go and buy some more, which I normally buy it in boards off them. Oh, we haven't got any. We sold all to styles and banks. Right, I'll have to try and find somewhere else to get some quickly. And I got a phone call from Simon Hope, who does Hope Wood Turning Tools. Do you fancy an all expenses paid trip to Frankfurt to demonstrate in Germany? So that was a resounding yes. Want some blanks. I found out that the sycamore they bought from Germany went to Sotley Estate, where the guy who does the wood that I normally buy. He then sold it to Stiles and Bates. I then bought some from Stiles and Bates, which went back to Suffolk again. I then took the wood from Suffolk to Frankfurt. It's now been back to Suffolk and down to Swindon, and now it's up in Yorkshire. So I can't say it's air miles, but some of this wood has travelled a long way in the last few weeks. I'm going to turn the speed right down first. I have brought the tail center up. It's on a screw chuck. It should be fine. I'll turn it down to about 200 and something and see what happens.
Sorry about this.
Sweet.
It's frozen. I think it might have unplugged it.
Yeah, we nearly had the problem of signal by itself. Okay. Yeah, I suddenly realised a minute ago, I suddenly looked and suddenly realised that I hadn't even brought the piece of wood out of the van. So we nearly had a demonstration on how to turn a piece of wood without making any shavings. So I can only get up to about 470 RPM at the moment, so I'm not sure how it's going to work. Basically, initially, I'm going to do a pull cut using a long grind bowl gauge, just to try and level up this face. This face is running uneven, so is this face, and this top edge here is also uneven. So I want to get the blank as clean, as cylindrical as possible. So what I'll do is put the tool on the tool rest, do the ABC, so anchor the tool, I'll rub the bevel, and then I'll roll the tool over until it's into contact, and then I can basically just pull the tool back. All I'm trying to do initially is take off the high spots. Once I've got that bevel in contact and I've got my cut, I can basically move my body backwards and forwards on my feet rather than moving my arms. I put my face shield in, but the problem with the face shield when you've got the microphone on is it tends to be every breath. And most of the time I will turn without the face shield. In my own workshop, I have a 3M VersaFlow mask and power unit, so I get filtered air blown into the helmet. I have 6-inch dust extraction ports going to all 3 lathes that I have, and all the other machines. Quick look. As you can see, or I might be able to see on the camera, probably not on there. Still got a fair bit to go just until I get to a flat surface. The 1/2-inch bowl gauge, one of the Simon Hope ones. 5/8 bar. For some reason in the UK, we measure spindle gauges by the bar and bowl gauges by the distance across the flutes. It gets really annoying for people when they not sure which one they're supposed to be using. And one of the food turners in the UK has actually got a high street shop. It literally is on the high street in Lowestoft where I live. And I live above my shop. And, not a very big shop, but I've got enough space to have my gallery. I sell tools, finishers, timber, and everything else. I have brought some stuff with me, but it's in the van. Basically, it's quite a long way to drag it all the way out the van round here. Right, so that's flat. Not a very nice cut on it, but it will have to do. Now I'm going to do this outside edge. Let's see if I can get a little bit more speed up. The tool rest, make sure everything's locked down. So again, ABC, anchor the tool rest, rub the bevel. If I bring the handle down, I can actually rub the bevel underneath the cutting edge, lift the handle, there's my cut. I'll keep everything the same and just move my body, not my arms. Cut. Go straight back and do another one without having to reset the tool. what I'm going to do, I can't get the tool rest underneath. And ideally, I'd like to try and take a bit of the meat off this side as well. So see if I can get the tool rest in a position where I can take some off this edge. What I'll probably do is just do a push cut down there with a standard grind. Anchor the tool, rub the bevel, lift the handle. There's the first bit of dust coming off, a bit of wax. I'll leave this branching around a bit. Pretty much got a flat surface there now I can work to. One little patch on this edge where I can still see a little bit of the wax, a little bit of discoloration. But now I've basically set my parameters. I know where my top's going to be. I know what my diameter is going to be, plus or minus a couple of millimeters for a cleanup cut. So now I want to start working back on this face. This is rippled sycamore. And the reason you get ripple in wood tends to be that there's been a bacteria or insect infestation in the tree, and the wood will send extra resin to areas of the tree where it's been attacked. And that way it can hopefully ward block any further damage being done. So the wood tends to be slightly heavier on one side than it is on the other. We'll see if I can get any more speed up, but no is the answer. So I'm about 500 RPMs. It just means I'm going to have to do all my turning. Will actually have to be a bit slower than what I would normally do it. So again, I'm going to anchor the bevel, lift and move my handle, pick up the cut. I just want to get a reasonable cut across the bottom here. Position, see if that helps. Right, that'll do for now. Next thing I want to do is quickly mark out. I'm going to put a dovetail recess in the bottom rather than a spigot. I tend to use dovetail recesses because I tend to sell my work to non-woodturners, and they don't know what a dovetail recess is. So why do I go to the hassle of putting a spigot on there, turn it with a spigot, then I've got to turn it around, remount it, turn the spigot off, sand it, seal it, etc. So I leave a dovetail recess in it, just decorate it, make it look like it's supposed to be there. A lot of people will use a set of calipers, mark out whatever the diameter you need is, put the left leg on the tool rest, line it up as you push that into the wood, line it up with the right hand leg. When the two are in line, you've basically marked out your diameter. Very accurate. The issue can be, like one of my friends did, who's well into his 70s, momentary lapse of concentration. He caught the right hand leg, it came up, bounced off his glasses, into his head, out through the skin. It only went in about an inch, but he had to go into his wife and sort of say, dear, can you help me? With a set of calipers out of his head. So use them on spindle work. That I think is just not worth the aggravation. So after he done that, I was using them up until that time, I came up with these, which are hinge dividers. You can either do exactly the same thing. If the right leg catches, they basically spin off, still potentially dangerous, or you could put them in the hole that you've made using the tail center and scribe it. A really simple way, and most of you either got kids or grandkids, nick a set of compasses out of their maths kit. So there's my dovetail recess marked with a compass without any risk of life in the limb. So that's what I'm going to be working to. I'm going to move the tool rest in and just set my foot diameter. Then I'll bring the tail rest back up again and we'll get rid of some of the excess timber we've got here. Basically just use a standard parting tool. I don't know whether you can see on the camera. We've got an overhead shot. Or it's not working. Right. Try and do it like that then, see if we can see it. Some of my tools have got marks, which I call the top of the tool. So standard parting tool, you think, well, you can use it either way up. So this one's got Sharpie pen on one side, but the other side is nice and shiny. You can try to see that in case anybody's watching online. The reason I do that is when I sharpen the tool, I'll always sharpen it upside down first, turn it over, sharpen what I call the bottom bevel. That will raise a burr on this top edge, and that's the sharpest that tool is ever going to be, that little tiny burr raised. So it's almost like using it as a negative rate scraper. That little tiny burr, pull it up my fingernail, and I can get nice little shards of fingernail coming off on the end of the tool. I can use it that way, it will still cut, but while I've got that little tiny burr on there, I might as well make use of it. Don't want to be turning that speed all night. That's when you've got speed where it seems to be happy. 400 RPM. That'll be interesting. So all I'm going to do is just do a push, line it up with that line I made earlier with the pencil. So that's most of it done. I'll go over to a 1/4 inch bowl gouge. Tool rest is a bit low. During the evening, I will be moving the tool rest with the lathe running. If you're not happy with doing that, then obviously stop the lathe first, then move the tool rest. One problem we often get is we get this pit in the middle, whether it's in the bottom of a bowl or something, we end up with a pit, and the more we fight it, we go from pimple to a dimple and a dimple to a pimple, and we end up chasing until we go through the bottom, we make a really naff lampshade. So one way we can get rid of that pimple, if basically you grind your tools at a certain angle, say 45 degrees, to stop you doing dimples, if you put some marks at 45 degrees on your lathe bed, so as you're coming along, in the bottom of a bowl, as you come round right to the bottom, the very bottom of any bowl is basically going to have a little flat on it, whether it's 2 millimeters wide or bigger. As you come round, if you can look down through your tool to the parallel lines you put on here at 45 degrees to match your tool. If it's 50 degrees, put the lines at 50 degrees. If you come around, when you're swinging the tool around, if you can look down through the tool and see that it's parallel to your pen lines on your tool lathe bed, then you know you're actually going to be going across the bottom straight. Say it was getting a pimple in or dimple in the bottom. To get rid of a pimple, we've got some options. The one I always use is basically If I put that to the untrained eye, that looks like a pencil with a magnet on it. But it's actually a bevel indicating device. So wherever that pencil is now pointing, that is the angle or where that tool wants to go. So if it's here, that's the direction the tool wants to go. If it's pointing that way, that's the direction the tool will want to go, because the bevel dictates where the tool is going to travel. So as long as I know that my tool is pointing in the right direction, and this may look like a piece of dowel with two magnets stuck on the end, but this is actually a flute indicating device. So wherever that's pointing tells me where the flute is pointing. So if I do my normal cut across the bottom here, let me just get a pen. What I'll do is I'm just going to mark somewhere like halfway up the side ring of that bowl gouge. That's a 1/2 inch bar bowl gouge. If I do my normal cut, I'll pick up the cut, running across the bottom, flute's roughly 45 degrees. As I get to the bottom, if I open the flute, so you can see the flute's now opening up, I'm raising the handle. And you can't see on the end of the camera, but to see some of that pen is now just rubbed off. I can now actually just push the tool gently over that pip, and that pip has come off so gently it's actually laid just inside the flute of the tool rather than pinging across the workshop. Get that off there because there's one there, charge £5 each for them. So if I do it again, I'm doing my normal cut. I'm only doing it with this tool basically so you can see it easier. So you can see the flute's roughly at 45 degrees. I've got bevel contact, getting near the center. The last few minutes, what we tend to do is keep the tool in the same position and push. And then last few fibers in there tend to snap off and you end up a little bit torn grain. Just that little pimple in the middle, and you go ping over the other side of your workshop. Just bring the tool, rub the bevel, pick up the cut. There it is. Just so I get to it, lift the handle, turn the flute. So the flute is pretty much horizontal. And as long as I keep that top corner of that wing away from the wood, then that little pimple comes off. There's another one. That's £10 about tonight already, look. So really simple technique. I don't actually need it because if you look at any of my bowls, when we stop for a cup of tea, you'll see that in the middle of my pieces, I put my maker's mark, which is basically a stainless steel disc. So I get these made locally to me. They're stainless steel, laser engraved or laser cut. So they're completely, all my name and bits and pieces have been laser cut into it. I just drill a 30mm hole while the wood is on the lathe, glue them in. I've got a little tiny center dot in the middle, which is dead center. So if I ever need to remount the piece, I know I can always line that dot up on a, you can see it, on the tail center, and I know that piece will be lined up. They cost me around about, last time I ordered 200, that was a couple of years ago. I think I paid about £1 each for them. Someone did say you could put £1 coin in the bottom, but then I'd have to double the value of my work. With the lathe running at the speed it is, it's not being particularly conducive to a good finish straight off the tool. I need to cut my dovetail recess. And all I generally use is a skew chisel. If you use any of the sort of guides and things and jigs, they normally set them around about 15 degrees. Jaws tend to be anywhere between 13 and 15 degrees. So I'll pick up half of the cut, or half the depth I need to go. So if that camera isn't working, it may need resetting, mightn't it?
Yeah.
Just normally have to turn it all off and turn it back on again if it's been disconnected, because the computer won't recognize it. Right, well, if you need to do anything, I can work around you. So basically, I've got a little recess in there. While I've got the tool in my hand, I'm just going to put a little cut just to define what will be my foot. I'm just going to go back to the 1/4 inch bowl gauge and just see if I can get a bit of a better clean up cut on the edge, because everything at the moment is just bouncing around. I'm having to turn much slower than I'd like. The other issue with the ripple, it makes the wood a bit heavier, a bit denser, so you can get the tool knocking back, which we often get turning over a knot. The tool will go clunk, clunk, clunk every time it hits the knot, and the tool bounces, so we lean onto the tool even more. That's generally the wrong thing to do. Hopefully I'll show you what to do in a minute, because while I'm get rid of some of this weight. Pencil. So I know this outside edge is reasonably flat, all bar one little cut. I'm going to put a slightly convex rim on my bowl, so I might want 4 or 5 mil for the height, so that might be the very maximum of my convex. So the bottom of my bowl could be around about here somewhere. So that'll be the underside of the bowl. This will actually be the rim, and this last section is what's going to make the convex top. So between this line under here that I've just scored with the skew chisel and this line, that's where I've got to make my shape. Again, I'm just going to go over to the long grind, anchor the tool, roll the tool, there's the cut. And if I just move my body back as I'm doing the cut, doing the full cut, rather than move my arms, if I use my arms all the time, I've got all these linkages. Any movement on any of these linkages will transfer onto the piece of wood. So I tend to have sort of one leg in front, one leg behind. And basically I could lean over to here and do a cut from there to there with the tool against my body. You can quite easily do an 18-inch pull cut if your body's in the right position to start off with. Normally a bowl blank like this, I'll be turning it somewhere in the region of 1500 to 2000 RPM. Normally manage about 400 RPM at the moment. Hopefully once I've removed some of this excess timber, hopefully that'll allow me to get the speed up. When I'm teaching, I generally say to people that a long grind is a good tool for rapid wood removal. If you're a beginner, it's not really a very good tool to use, because basically you're getting rid of the wood quickly, but all that wood you're getting rid of quickly is practice wood. So that's what you could be using to practice your cuts. Keep it around there, probably. Pardon? Yeah, I might do in a second, but might put it back on again in a moment as well. Yeah. You can see on there, basically all my tools, my standard grind tools, have all got double bevel. So I've got one bevel, which is the actual bevel that I use. The secondary bevel can be any angle you want. It's just getting rid of the heel of the tool. If you just put it on a platform and grind it, obviously you just get one angle coming down there, and this piece coming up here, so you end up with quite a hard heel. That can damage the fibers of the wood, especially going inside a bowl or something. That can damage the fibers. It can keep lifting off the cutting edge. So a lot of my tools have only literally got about 2.5 mil of bevel, which I'll actually be using. So going back to what I said a moment ago about practicing, if you forget the long grind and basically start creating your shape using a standard grind, then every cut you do is basically a practice cut, ready for the next, for your last cut. The more you can practice, the more proficient you'll get. fully turning, let's say about 440 RPM. Getting a bit of tool bounce there. Come back a little bit, try and pick that up. So every time I do this cut, it's a practice for when I get round to doing my final cut. Just before I do the final cut, I go to my grinder and just sharpen the tool, come back. You've built up that muscle memory of whatever shape you're doing, whether it's the inside of a bowl, outside of a bowl, it's irrelevant. As long as your last cut needs to be the good cut. So that's when you have to sharpen your tool. Sharpening your tools at the beginning, just to butcher the rest of the wood away, is almost pointless if you're not going to sharpen your tool just before your last cut. The last cut is the one that's really important. So that's when you want to sharpen the tool. If this piece of wood is 12-inch diameter, 300 mil geometric, we're spinning like I'd normally spin it around about 1200 RPM. This outside edge of this piece of wood will travel 3/4 of a mile a minute. So if you get your tool, sharpen it up in the morning, and you come out, right, I'm going to make a 12 out of a 12-inch blank piece of wood and use the same tool, you might be working it on for an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours. Every minute, this bit of wood is blunting this tool 3/4 of a mile a minute. So if I gave you a hand plane and a piece of wood 3/4 of a mile long, somewhere along there, you're planing it down, you're going to want to sharpen the tool. It's exactly the same with these. These go blunt. Wood has silica and stuff in it. As the tree's growing, it picks up bits of mineral from the ground. So that'll help blunt the tool. Knots and things are very hard to knock the edge off your tool. So be mindful about when you sharpen your tools and how often. A good grinding system will save a lot of money in the long run. I use the Wolverine system. When I sharpen my tools, something like that, I'll just start the grinder up, put it on the platform, roll it back, forward, take it off, use it. I might get 1 or 2 sparks come off the grinder. Again, it might be me being tight, but that's the Yorkshire bit in the head end. I'm going to go back to the long grind. Basically do the shaping, get the weight off the wood. It's not going to be a very clean cut. I'm basically butchering the wood off. I know that when I get down to the approximate shape I want, I know I can do a push cut and get as good a finish off the tool as I can with a push cut in 1 or 2 passes. Going to be making a bit of a little foot detail up this by the foot in a second. Just trying to get rid of as much weight as possible. And I'd like to have this bit here slightly concave, so it match the convex on the top. I'm just going to stop and have a quick look. There'll be lots of tear out probably. Yep. I'm not worried about that at all at the moment. See if I can get some speed up. Now I've lost a lot of that weight. That's behind me now. I'm guessing this is a floating floor. The rat doesn't seem to be going everywhere. I've got up to just over 800 RPM, which will make my life a little bit easier. So I still want to take a bit more weight out here. Anchor the tool. Tool rest is too hard, so I moved it earlier. Let's put that down. Anchor the tool, up the bevel, roll the tool over. There's the cut. That was the tool rest running. These Simon Hook handles are quite handy because you get you have double-ended tools. So I've got a standard grind, exactly the same grind as this tool. This tool's now getting a bit blunt. I want to try and get a finishing cut on the bottom here in the moment. So I just want to make pick up my cut just to the side of cut I made earlier. Looking down, looking at the shape. So now I want to start doing some finishing cuts on here. Now I've made this little foot detail, and you can see I've got extra timber here that I can get rid of. I'm just going to go back to the long grind. So I'm blunting this tool rather than the freshly ground standard toll gouge. As I do this for my living now, I have to try and make sure that everything I do is done in the quickest time possible. So I'm always finding techniques. I don't mind my initial cuts. I don't care how rough they are, whether there's tear out, because I know hopefully when I come back to do my final cut, hopefully I'll get a reasonable finish off the tool. At the speed you move the tool along the tool rest is dictated by the speed the piece of wood is spinning at. I'm actually going against the grain. normally something you would do. I was asked at the weekend, what do I mean about going against the grain? If you think about your piece of wood, basically being a load of straws together. So on this one, the grain's running through sort of 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. If I'm going with the grain or up the grain, I'm going up the grain. Each of these are the fibers of the wood. If I'm going up this way, this fiber is being supported by the next fiber. This one's being supported by this fiber. So it's much better for the wood if you cut that way. If you come the opposite way, there's no support behind this fiber, so the fiber can actually snap off and break further down the grain. And if you get tear out, that's our nemesis. Anything other than tear out, if you've got a little bit of lumps and bumps, they normally come out with the first little bit of abrasive, but tear out can be anything up to about 1/8 of an inch deep. So that's where you really got to just try and hone the skills to try and prevent any tear out. This bit of wood has got that ripple in it, so there's a funny couple of areas where the grain wants to pluck out because the grain's not running in its normal direction. It can also be a bit harder. So some up here. Quite often, if you get something like a knot in a piece of wood, what we tend to do is lean harder onto the bevel to try and force the tool to cut through it. Rather than do that, because every time that knot comes around with that funny bit of twisted grain, we get that thing where it seems to be bouncing, and we look at a piece of work and we've got some funny sort of ripples. You can't see any on there at the moment. But rather than trying to push the tool even harder, because ideally we want to be floating the bevel, not rubbing the bevel. If we do have a piece and the tool seems to be keep knocking backwards and forwards, rather than push hard against onto the bevel, just float the bevel and push down on top of the tool. By pushing down on top of the tool rest and then having to use your right hand, if you're right-handed, to create the shape, what you do is you're pinning the tool onto the tool rest. What happens is otherwise the tool moves back. It might only be a fraction of a millimeter or a couple of thou every time. But our natural reaction is to keep fighting back and going back to the same place. And as that bit of wood comes around with that knot in it, it hits the tool. The knot doesn't cut as easy, so it pushes the tool back. Our natural reaction, we go back in and we do it. It literally can be just literally in the sort of movement of your skin and your hands. So all of a sudden, just put some weight on top of the tool. We might have it in a minute when we go around this other side. So I know we've got this funny bit of grain here. It might cause a bit of an issue in a minute. So if it happens, I'll try and do it. For that cut, I basically had the tool on the tool rest, 2 fingers on the top, just guiding the tool. I'm just checking all the shapes I've got. See, that's looking okay. But we've probably still got a little bit of tear out just around this edge here. So I might have to come back to that. These little ripples and things, doesn't really matter. They will come out in the first abrasive if I need to. I will go over in a minute with a negative H scraper and take some of these off. If it was turning faster, it would be easier. Let me just run back up here. I've got a little bit of tear out, just that spot there. There's a funny bit of grain. Just gonna have one more go, see if I can clear that off. I'll pick it up from underneath the foot. that slightly slower pass has got that most of that tear out. So a little tiny bit right in that edge. That'll do for the moment. Something I've been using a lot recently is negative rake scrapers. For those who haven't come across a negative rake yet, a standard scraper is basically flat across the top and one bevel underneath. You tend to have the tool cutting on center, the handle high, something like that. I always found with ordinary scrapers, the tool was always snatching. I was never particularly comfortable with them. So I ended up using them freehand. So something like this, I'll be standing here with them and doing it freehand until we had a hands-on night at one of the clubs I belonged to. And one of the guys who's a very good turner saw me what I was doing, came up behind me and smacked me over the back of the head and said, "Don't be so bloody stupid." But it worked for me. And I found it much more comfortable and safer. So a negative rake scraper basically has two bevels. So you've got one bevel on the bottom, one bevel on the top. And any scraper can be ground to it. Ideally, you want something around about a 75-degree included angle. So you've got 37.5 degrees there, 37.5. If it can be between 70 and 80, will work really nicely. I've got two platforms for my Wolverine jig. One of them set at around about 50 degrees. The other one is set around about, I think it's around about 37 degrees. I sort of got a little basic kiddie's compass and put it on the thing and looked at it and thought, yeah, that's somewhere near. That's as accurate as I get with my sharpening. But what I do with them when I sharpen them, once you've got the two bevels and they're matching angles, you can just do one angle on one wheel, one side of the wheel, turn the tool over, do the other angle. I always take the old burr off. So this is my wheel, put it on my platform, roll it around just to take the old burr off and grind a tiny bit of metal off this face, turn it so what will be the top of the tool is uppermost. A couple of times on the wheel, it'll raise a burr on this edge, exactly the same as what I said about on my parting tool. And again, if I slide up and down my fingernail, it's just taking little shards off my fingernail. Really sharp, but that little burr is what does the work, and it won't last very long. Simon Hooper's got his own range of negative rake scrapers, and they work really well. Basically the same thing, apart from he's got the bigger angle on the top and the small angle on the bottom. You still sharpen the bottom one last to raise the burr on this top edge. So I'm just going to have a go with this one. They tend to like to work around about 1500 RPM, and we've only got about 800. So the faster they're running, the better they cut. We'll see what happens. Got a little tiny lump on here with that funny bit of grain. Just want to make sure that this foot is slightly concave, so it always sits on the outside edge. So I'm just going to use the corner of the tool now just to go inside that little foot detail. I'm getting these little tiny curly shavings, which means it's cutting. If I'm getting shavings, it's actually cutting. If I'm getting dust, then it tends to be scraping. I say these tools are gentle to use. If I lay the tool in my hand, I'll put my thumb over it just in case something goes wrong. But I can literally just put the tool on the piece of work. If I'd done this with a negative rate with a standard scraper, it would be sticking out of the wall or through the window over the other side of the room there. But I'm cutting, so I'm getting these little tiny shavings. So this is the round one. Basically take it off to sharpen this one. The other one you can sharpen it on the straight onto the tool platform. So ideally, I'd have a bit more speed. It would be cutting a bit nicer. When it's cutting, I'm getting some nice little shavings coming off. Not sure what the finish is going to be off the tool at the moment. But again, Just hold it in the palm of one hand. I really can't turn shaving as fine and delicate as that, but with the negative rate scrapers, it's pretty much got rid of all them little lumps and bumps that I had there earlier. There's a couple of little lines in there, which I can get rid of with the first abrasive. The foot there, I want to put some detail in there. There's a couple more lines there I want to get rid of. It's not there, but actually got a groove there. So they're bouncing in this lathe is a little bit of an issue. I'll go back to that little one I had earlier. See if I can just float over there. So I want to put a little bit of detail in some of this. This wood is actually a bit drier and a bit more brittle than what I thought it was. I'm going to put over a bit of sanding paste. This will just put some moisture into the fibers before I go to the next step with it. This is basically purified beeswax and pharmaceutical grade mineral oil mixed together in a slow cooker. I just found the slow cooker the safest way of doing it, because you haven't got to worry about it sort of catching the light on the electric stove or the gas hob or anything. Luckily I'm single, so I don't have to worry about using the thing and then the missus coming around the corner and complaining that I've been using her slow cooker. This is a slightly different composition to what I normally do for wood turning, but I haven't had a chance to make any. This one is 60% mineral oil, 40% beeswax. What I usually use is the ratio the opposite way around, so 40% mineral oil, 60% beeswax. This will actually stop 90% of the dust when I'm sanding. I'm going to use a piece of chestnut safety cloth, just wipe off the excess. It's actually incredibly good for your hands as well. I use it as a moisturizer. People often wonder how good is it as a moisturizer. And I tell them, well, I'm 104, so I don't think I look too bad at that age. So I've wiped off the excess. The main reason, because if I stand here, start the lathe up, I'm going to get all of my glasses, then I'll wipe it, then I'll smear, and I can't see nothing, and everybody in that line there will get a fine coating, whether they like it or not. So I'm just going to probably just use one grade of abrasive, probably about 180. So I've got some little lines on here, but I'm going to decorate the bottom of this in a moment, and most of it we're not going to see. So this product I put on here, what does it do? It basically just coagulates the sanding dust. Basically, it binds it all together. So the dust comes off and it's heavy because it's all joined together with other bits of dust. And rather than getting airborne dust around the workshop, some of it will stick to the abrasive. Some of it will just drop off, and most of it, I'll put my hand underneath here, it sticks together and it clumps together and it's heavy. As soon as it falls off, it just falls to the floor. So I'm just going to do inside the dovetail recess. There's no sharp edges. Whenever I'm sanding by hand, I always use my spare hand just to support the hand that's actually doing the work. And I'll always sand with, he's calling it sand, we've got to call it abrading now, if you don't use sandpaper. When I'm abrading, I always make sure that my fingers are being elongated. If I was doing it with the lathe going backwards and I was standing here, I would stand at the top here so my fingers are being stretched rather than compressed. Because if you're doing it here and the lathe's coming towards you and anything snatches and your abrasive snatches on a bad bit of grain or something and it actually compresses your fingers, that's when you snap fingers or snap tendons and things. So always work with your fingers being elongated. The lathe is still going in the normal direction, so I'm standing inside the foot on that half, so the wood is coming up. And using that little bit of paste stuff will actually make a little bit of sort of paste as well. That will sometimes just fill up any little tiny defects in the grain. Any tiny little bits of tearate you may still have left. A little foot detail there. I'll have a quick look and to see whether I want to go to the next grade. Off some of that first. I'm not too worried about the finish on here because in a moment I'm going to be putting some texturing on it. That'll do. So I could sand it to another abrasive if I was going to keep it as sort of natural wood underside of a bowl. Then I would go through the abrading a bit more. There's some little lines. I can actually use those to my advantage to some degree by adding some texture and filling in between those lines. So I'm going to use one of the little Hope texturing tools. I'm just going to put a little bit of detail on the underside of the foot. And depending on what angle I push the tool in further, that will dictate what patterns I get on the wood. Leave some little gaps between the texture. It's gone a bit quick on the outside edge, hence the squealing noises. So there's no real point to putting the texture on there, except when someone comes into my shop and they pick a bowl up and look at it, they suddenly feel something underneath. And they go, what's that? They turn it over, and if they see the underside has all been sort of textured as well, it's, to my mind, it's just one more detail that they've seen, and they think, oh, it must be worth even more money now because it's got texturing underneath it as well. So this is basically a point tool. I'm just going to put a couple of little grooves in here just to add to detail. I just need to mark out where I've got. So I've got a bit going around there somewhere. One up here. All I'm doing is putting a couple of little grooves. I can mark it where they were. I'm just going to put a couple of little beads. This is the Ashley Isles. Yep, there was 2 minutes and we'll stop for a cup of tea. So basically it's an Ashley Isles bead forming tool. So get that speed up again a bit more. Little bead there. A little bit of a catch there. So I've got the little grooves and things. All I want to do now is quickly flip over. For the bristle brush, I tend to use these type of brushes rather than the wire ones. Just to get rid of any little bits of torn grain. To be honest, in the workshop, I tend to just go over it with a blowtorch, but there's not the good.
What's the break off, Darren?
Yep, yeah, I might just stick a coat of oil on there.
Well, the guest wants to a cup of coffee or tea and a biscuit, so that in the back, we'll then come back. I will rapid draw and Darren will continue. Okay, thank you.
Ready to begin? Yep. Right, we'll carry on. Just as we stopped, I quickly put one coat of oil on here. Normally I'd put 2 or 3 coats on. There's been a few little fibers will raise up. Normally I'll buff them off. But I'll probably end up doing that at home in my leisure. But what I am going to do, like my bowls, like the one I passed around, it's got little beads, and I always like to frame my colouring and texturing with a little bead of some sort, just so there's a clear definition between what's textured and what's not. Some pieces, no, all the ones have got, well, the one with the red, gold and black sort of bit, basically it's the same as this, the texturing tool. I then sprayed it, after I'd sanded it all, I sprayed it with the black chestnut spirit stains, then the red, covered the whole thing with gold gilt wax, buffed it off. That then leaves the gold wax actually in the texturing that I've done. So I say you get the black, gold and whatever one.
We got a question on chat, is that the finishing oil?
Yes, yeah, finishing oil. I tend to use that. Basically, it's tung oil based. It's just got some accelerators in it to make it go off a little bit quicker. This ideally wants 2 or 3 coats. That tends to be one of my go-to oil finishes if I'm doing something with natural wood and I don't want to put wax on it. The problem with waxes is they tend to get damaged easier. Things like wood wax 22, beeswax melt at too low a temperature. So if you're trying to sell a piece of work and someone stood there for 20 minutes holding it, by the time they say, no, not for that, they walk away, the only thing you've got is their fingerprints on it, which is really handy if you can get their laptop and you can do their fingerprint ID to get on their bank account. Didn't say that. Yeah, the more it gets handled, something like beeswax, the more it's get handled, more fingerprints go on it, the duller the finish goes, where oil finish tends to be pretty much impervious to most things. I'm going to do a little bead on this outside edge. It's a wood in my mouth. I'm going to use a point tool. I sharpen mine slightly different. Basically got 3 facets, but I only actually use one. Top of my tool, it's got a darker mark on it, which you can hopefully see on there. Just see it when we get in the right place. Just a bit of Sharpie pen, so I know that's the facet. That's going to be my top. The other 2 sides are the ones I sharpened. So when I sharpen this side, I basically just put it on the platform, roll the tool over, sharpen this edge, and that'll raise a burr on this edge. Up down my fingernail. One of these days, I'm going to run right through my fingernail so I can get a little bit of on that side, turn the tool around, do exactly the same. And again, I've got fingernail on that edge. So that means that these 2 edges are the sharpest they're ever going to be. I never use the bottom of this tool. It's always this way up. What I found with that tool like that is I can actually go in, do a little push cut, make a little V cut, and then I can use the side wings to actually turn a bead. I can turn beads with a nice spindle gouge or something, but if you get it wrong, you take a great lump out of it, and then you've got to grab a sort of involuntary redesign of your shape. With this, it tends to be much easier. So literally all I'm going to do is just do a little push cut. So that's set size of my bead, and I'll use the side wing, pick up the cut. Obviously, it's all down to moving the tool that creates the bead shape, but I'm getting shavings. Shavings mean I'm actually cutting. This side's a bit more difficult because I need to get my prescription changed on my glasses, and it's all a bit blurry down here. And what I don't want to do is go and hit the other side and put a big groove in it. As long as I can get it somewhere close to where I want it, I can do the rest with my abrasive. Let's have a quick look. So pretty much I turn a little bead on the outside edge there. There's pretty much no tear out. If I look at it really closely, I can see it's like a little tiny micro flat on there. I'll just go straight over back on with my 180 abrasive on the far side. Support one hand, get my head out of the camera. Obviously that wax oil mixture has basically been cut right through now, so I'm now getting the dust. If I breathe in a lot, you won't have a lot of dust in your room. That'll do. Thrust the bead on the underside, and I'll need to do another one on the other side. Take it off the screw chuck. See in a minute whether I actually measured this chuck correctly. Hopefully that's fitted. I hate these little Nova chucks with this ball hex thing on the end. I'm getting that onto the chuck. Those tighten up with both holes and give it a thump to make sure it's seated right back against the jaws. Hopefully that'll run fairly true now. So again, I need to work out how to get this flat. So I'll do the same thing as I've done earlier. I'll probably do a pull cut. If I didn't want to do a pull cut, I can do a push cut, and I'll do both just to show you. Try and get as much speed as possible and just find a place where it's reasonably comfortable, not vibrating too much. So again, if I was going to do the pull cut, I'll do it exactly the same as I did before. ABC, anchor the tool, rub the bevel, roll the tool, there's the cut. I do have to keep myself mindful that this is a smaller dovetail than what I normally use. So I'm going to try and remind myself not to take too big a cut like I would in my own workshop. So that's cleared off most of it. I want to do it as a push cut. Still a bit of an edge on that one. Handle down low, rub the bevel, lift the handle. The flute's roughly at 45 degrees. And I know that that is roughly the angle of the tool that I want it to go. So we're doing a straight cut. That gives me my angle, and that's my flute. Off the bevel, lift the handle. There's the cut. I can come off. Once I know where that cut is, I can come off the face of the work, move it in a millimeter, pick it up. I'll just do a push cut across the surface. But you'll know whether you've got correct bevel control. You'll get proper shavings coming off like that. I'm not pushing particularly hard on the bevel. I was talking to someone earlier about the bevel that should just be floating on the surface. I like to put one finger on top of the tool, pick up the cut. There's that funny bit of twisted grain. I'm not pushing in hardly at all. It's literally just touching the surface. Because I've got proper bevel control, bevel contact is just rubbing. The tool will do what I want it to do. Just try and let this tool run over. I want to try and find that bit of grain again so I can try and show. Try and let that tool bounce over there for a moment or two. I can feel the tool is bouncing backwards and forwards on that funny bit of grain. So I'm going to try and make it worse. I'm hardly using any pressure. I'm letting that tool bounce. So hopefully, there's somewhere there'll be a funny ridge where I was then going over and feel the grain across there is suddenly got a funny little lump in it. Another bit there. It's just a funny bit of grain for some reason. I've got a darker line going through here. So it might just be a slightly harder bit of grain. And it was just knocking the tool. And it was just pushing the tool back. But it's just tiny, tiny amounts. And you don't normally notice it, but you can always hear it or feel it. So I let that spin in my fingers. I can feel there's a funny bit there. Certainly a little bit there. So there's a couple little spots. So this is where I'd come back behind it. So I'd rub the bevel. You can see the tools bouncing back and forwards. You hear it rattling on the surface. But there it's running pretty much smooth. So if I trap the tool between my hand and the tool rest, so that I'm pushing down on top of the tool. Come all the way, that's nice and smooth. Back here somewhere, there's the cut. Pushing down on top of the tool. You can hear it, tap, 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 tap noise. That's that funny bit of grain. Hopefully now that funny bit of grain will have turned quite nicely. A little bit of tear out there, but I've got rid of that funny lump that was forming. Basically now I've got it flat. I want to work out roughly my diameters of where I want my texturing. So if we go something around about there somewhere. So everything inside there will be the bowl. This will be the colored textured section. So I know I want to have a convex top on here. So I've got to go in here and in on this end. Maybe the high spot will be around about there somewhere. So I'll go downhill from here and downhill from that line. So I'm creating that concave, convex curve. So do some with this tool because it's getting blunt, so I might as well finish it off. You hear that chattering again, so I'm now pushing down with my left hand harder where that little funny patch was. And I'll start filling down this edge. You eventually get to a stage where you know the bevel pretty much the angle of all your tools. It becomes second nature that you can put the tool straight on the piece of work and just pick up the cut. That's what comes with practice. The more you practice it, the more proficient you get at anything. A little tiny flat there. You hear that chatter, so I'm going to push down on top of the tool again, of the bevel. feel like I've got too much of a point on top of my sort of crown of my convex top, so I'm just going to take a little bit of that top edge off, pick up the cut somewhere, down on top of the tool. While it's on there, I'm just going to flick over it with the negative rate. Well, that really matters because I'm going to be texturing the majority of this bit.
Those.
These,
Yeah.
they're Simon Hope wood turning tools.
You buy the spend and then you buy the end.
Yeah, got the two different sorts. So normally that'd be a straight scraper. And funnily enough, I actually ground my big scraper. I got a normal Hamlet scraper, and I ground it practically the same as this with a slight concave, a convex top on it. Simply, I remember I was turning a platter about 3 foot diameter, and if you're going across the bottom with a dead flat cutter on here, if the tool snags at all, that corner goes round. All of a sudden, you've got an 1/8 of an inch deep V cut in the middle of your work. And if you're only turning down to 1/4 of an inch anyway, on something sort of that big, you can't do many of them. So I ground it to an angle, and that way you can basically just go like that across the platter, and it'll always cut cleanly. I sell them in the shop. I've got some in the van. I could have bought everything in, but I've got about 12 crates of tools in the back of the van and stuff. I didn't bring any finishers. I didn't bring many finishers. But it's a long way from the van, all around up the path round here, down the hall, all the way back in again.
Do they come ground?
They come ground exactly how they should be, and they come with the instructions on how to sharpen them as well. But they're pretty simple, and they just do the job really well. I wish last weekend I was actually on commission. After I demonstrated them at the Woodturner weekend, Simon sold within about 20 minutes of me finishing my demo, he'd sold all the negative weight scrapers that he brought with him. Unfortunately, the rules are apparently, he never told me this, that you have to negotiate your commission before agreeing to anything. But he did pay for the trip to Germany and stuff, and we got on well. So he basically sort of let me order tools, and I pay for them once I've sold them, rather than have to pay for them up front. So I've got 3 or 4 of each of these in the van. The handles come separately. But these are the Simon Hope handles. You can just swap over. This is the 5/8 or 16 mil head. You can just unscrew them, take that one off, so you can just swap around the handles. So once you've got set handles and the set heads, you can do whatever you like with them, swap them to change. Really quick, really efficient. So I basically left this ridge on the inside here. What I had meant to do was leave a little ridge on the outside here, but I forgot. I'll put it down to age. I'm just going to put a pencil line around there. I'm going to try and keep all my check string basically within that pencil line, and this pencil line I just put on this edge because I haven't got much space there left to take any more off. I like doing colour with check string. People say, oh, well, why do you cut a lovely piece of wood? Well, this piece of wood, I wouldn't say is particularly lovely. It's a piece of sycamore. To my mind, it's pretty bland. If I've got a beautiful piece of fir timber, then generally I don't colour and texture it. But if I just turn this as a plain bowl, the same shape, put it in the shop, I might get 30 quid for it if I was lucky. The wood probably cost me 15 quid. But most of the bowls on there, the sunrise, the 2 that can have the blue colouring on, the one with the gold in, they all generally sell for about 85 quid in the shop. The one standing up with the iridescent paint on is a bit more expensive. That's got a lot more work gone into that one. But like the textured one, I can do that. All that gold, the red, the black and the gold takes me on average from finishing sanding to putting the first coat of lacquer on. Depends if I stop and have a swig of drink, somewhere between 6 and 7 minutes. But then I add 40 quid on the price. They tend to sell that for 85 quid, coloured and textured bowls. So So it's, for me, colouring and texturing doubles what I can charge for anything. I am going to put my helmet on for this. Basically, I'm going to use, this is an Arbortech grinder. Basically on the end, it's a new cutter I bought when I was in Germany. 3 wheels, or three little round cutters on an aluminium wheel. Spins at a heck of a rate of knots. The tool's got 2 handles, so I'll hold both handles. I've locked the, as best as that will do. I'm sure that will. Meant to do lathe as well. Look. So basically, I'm just going to do a random series of cuts on here. This tool will cut pretty much in any direction, so I can sweep it, straight lines, anything I want. It's a bit noisy, but it's a very quick and effective tool. You need to keep fingers and stuff out of the way, hence why locking the tool rest, or locking the spindle so it doesn't move. I normally use chainsaw cutters. I've got 4.5-inch chainsaw cutter in a 4.5-inch angle grinder, and I've got a 2-inch chainsaw cutter that'll go on this tool or the Proxon. But of course, all the cheap Chinese imports that came in, which disintegrate, basically they're now been banned for use in the UK, so I can't even demonstrate with them. I do use them in my own workshop when no one's looking. They did say you can take them back to the company where you bought them from and ask for your money back. And my 4.5-inch one I've had for 22 years, and I've never even cut myself on it. So, and I used to use it for doing oak framing for houses and things, repairing, putting beams into old properties and stuff. Never even cut myself. But there was a guy in America quite a few years back who I used to speak to on one of the forums, and he was trying to get them banned. I said, why? He said, well, they're dangerous. Someone's going to kill themselves with them. I thought, well, I've been using one for like 10, 15 years and never even cut myself. So what? And he showed pictures and photographs of his hand, and he was bandaged up, looked like he had a tennis racket sleeve around his hand. I said, what the hell have you done? Then he showed me the pictures that his wife took before they got him to hospital, and basically it was just like skin and bone and bits of stuff hanging off. It was grim. And I said, what the hell were you doing? He said, well, I was using it on a bowl. I said, I use mine on a bowl all the time. I've never even cut myself. Turns out he was sitting on his porch, holding onto a bowl on his lap with a 4.5-inch angle grinder inside with a chainsaw on it. At which point, when you get 5 or 6 of them teeth biting in at once, there's a hell of a lot of torque on there, and it ran straight up his hand, straight through his hand, straight up his arm. Well, I would have been, yeah, removing the lower end of the gene pool. But I did tell him that the tool, it wasn't the tool that was dangerous, it was the tool that was holding the tool. And then he said all these funny words and funny names, and they must be American words, because I'm sure I don't understand any of them. So we haven't spoken since. But yeah, that's the pointy end. That does a lot of damage. So I can put my visor down. I won't talk when I'm doing it, because all you'll hear is rubbish. So you might want to mute me, because you might hear just me heavy breathing. Yeah, which won't be pleasant. Wrong setting on my lid. Don't go down far enough. Better. I'll just wait for the tool to stop before I put it down. Move it around a bit further. Well, you could do this with a spoon and carving tool. Probably it would take a lot longer. The cutter itself is made by a company called Manka. They're a Korean company. They do all sorts of different cutters and blade things for different tools. And the only place I know you can definitely get them all at the moment is through a company called Chainsaw Bars. And they sell all the chainsaw bars, obviously, for chainsaws, but they also sell them tools for some reason. So I'm just going to run over here quickly with this little bristle brush. I tend to use these ones rather than the wire ones, because I basically got fed up with pulling bits of wire out of my face. They do tend to disintegrate eventually. If you want to try and just sort of burnish it, just take off any loose fibres in the workshop, and then we just sweep the shavings out of the way, hit it with a blowtorch. I'm not too worried about bits of torn grain in there, but what I don't want is any little bits of actual fibre just loose on the surface. Actually, what I want to end up with is something with texture on, which all the sharp edges have gone. So I want to rub the back of my hand over it. I'm comfortable that I can do whatever I want with it, and it'll feel soft. There's no sharp corners, apart from this outside edge here, which will come off in a minute or two. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to quickly hit it with a cellulose sanding sealer, basically just to seal the grain up before I put some black on it. And it's not my lathe, so I'll cover it up. It just seals the grain, just makes the ebonizing lacquer that I'm going to put on next, just gives that a better base. You can put it straight on bare wood, I quite often do. I just want this to have a half a chance of sitting on the surface that feels fairly flat. So just going to hit it with a hairdryer just to dry that off a little bit quicker. You want to use too much heat, because basically what you've done with the sanding sealer or any lacquer or finish you put on the surface, basically you're trying to block the capillary tubes. The capillary tubes have got air in them, so if you start heating them up too much, what will happen is that the air will expand, come up the tube, and that will give you blisters on the surface. Normally I'd let this dry, so naturally it dries in a few minutes. An extra little bit of heat does help, but I'm not concentrating in any one spot. In fact, I'm just warming up the surface of the timber. Means that my next coat, which is galvanizing lacquer, just go out a bit quicker. I always tend to spray down the sort of bottom here, never up here, because any overspray will go over and contaminate the back of the piece. Basically, want to put 2 thin coats. I'll do them consecutively, so literally as soon as I finish one coat, I'll be working on the next coat. I'm going to be using the chestnut rainbow waxes. You don't actually need to put them over black. I think all these iridescent paints and things always look better over the top of a black substrate. So I'm just trying to see any little spots where I haven't covered yet. Doesn't matter if I don't get it all. Of course, it will be getting completely covered in a minute with the other wax. Don't want to heat it up too much, just want to try and force dry it a little bit. So let's give that a couple of seconds while I get the next stuff ready. Right to the van, so there's something else in the van. I actually put my box of brushes actually on the top of my box of blanks for the next few days. And even though I forgot the blank and had to go and get it earlier, I actually took the box of brushes off the blanks to get the blank out and then didn't pick the stuff up. So I'm going to put on probably 4 different colours of the rainbow wax. The first one makes the biggest impact because it's like a cobalt blue, really, really funky colour. But the first one I made like this, I used just the blue and I thought that was all right. And then later on, I thought, well, it's just very blue. So I then started to add other blues to it. So I'm just using a cheap paintbrush. This is slightly unusual in that this is a water-based wax. So it's a completely man-made wax as opposed to beeswax or anything else like that. And basically, I just slap it on, get it in the bottom of all the texture. Don't want it to go over the edges.
You said this is rainbow chestnut wax.
Chestnut rainbow waxes, yeah. I'm completely covering the black. Yeah, yeah. You can leave some of the black showing. I like this particular style of colouring. I want to actually cover all the black up. The black just seems to make these blues and these sort of just slightly metallic. Just seems to make them colours pop a little bit more. I tried it without. It does work, but it doesn't seem to be quite as vibrant. Probably on there, you probably can't really see it, but at the end I'll pass it around and you will stick it on the table and have a look. So the first one is the darkest colour. I always work from dark to light. I've used they do a range of colours, also the rainbow colours. They do a violet one, which looks really good with red and a bit of charcoal. You know, quite a nice mix. I think it was on Monday, one of the guys who was at the Woodturners weekend was putting pictures of his bowl that he had made already. He said he had to get home and get into the workshop to try it and use the colours that he bought before he forgot how I'd done it. So within sort of 24 hours of the show finishing, he was already back in the workshop trying to copy it, but he couldn't get any of the blue waxes because Chestnut sold out of virtually all the blues within about 10 minutes of me doing my demo. Again, I didn't negotiate any bloody commission, but I am learning. And then they were just selling all the other colours, and they did at one stage debate whether to send someone home or back to, because they're in Stowmarket, which is in South Norfolk. They were going to send someone back to pick a load more up, and then they decided, because of how far it is, that they would offer free postage, I think, to anybody who paid for it there and then would get free postage on Monday and get the stuff shipped over to them. These are water-based waxes. They're basically, they're almost a paint rather than a wax. If you leave the product on there for a few minutes, this side here now is pretty much, apart from where it's a bit thicker, dry, where most wax would still be wet. So you can use it for various things. If you want to do something I know Tiny Turner, Emma Cook, she does like her gonks and things, and she'll like do a Christmas gonk, and she'll paint sort of Santa's hat in the red one of these, and literally by the time she's messed around doing something else with the body or something, then the hat's dried and he's got a nice red hat. So if you want to put it on and just put it in the texture, so if we've done something like this and what to do like the texture on this side, you could put some of the paint on there, or some of the wax on there, but get it off as soon as possible, just so you're leaving it in the low spots and taking it off the high spots, because it won't last very long, and if it dries, it's much harder to get off. You can get it off if you use a reducer of some sort. Chestnut do their own reducer, or Joe Sonia do flow medium. That tends to work just to take it off the surface. What you do is just keep on the pencils. Put a line there just so I know if I spin this around at some point, I know the last bit I've done. So the brushes I use, obviously, as you can see, I'm a very fine artist. I only use good brushes, the best I can get from the works, about £2.99 for a pack of 12. Nothing but the best. Right. That's basically the first coat on. First, they're water-based waxes. You can just wash them out in a bit of water. You don't need to wash them out. Before you move to the next colour, it just saves contaminating the next one too much.
Sorry, I passed it around.
Oh, right.
You got the wax?
We'll do a spot with a dark one, and I'll carry on with this one. That's the next one in my colour palette, so I need that one. This one, as I'm working through them, the next few colours I use less and less. So for this one, I'll actually get a blob initially, stick it in the lid. So the black was the background for the cobalt blue or the bright blue. The bright blue is the background for the other one. So as I go through the colours, they all have a little bit less of the previous colour used. So it's, if I had been really technical, I could say I could dry brush it, but I don't. Dry brushing is where you basically take out nearly all of the wax off the brush, and you spend ages sort of flicking over. All I want is some little spots of this just to create some definition between, so you can see there's two different colours on there, but not in any sort of big sort of blobs or anything. I just want. I had a couple which sold a couple of weeks ago before I got busy with demos and things. I've done the whole thing in sort of wave forms, and then I've done exactly the same colour, but with the thing all looking like waves, actually look really nice. So this is just a quicker version of it. It took a bit longer to control the tool. See, nothing overly technical about my painting abilities. Literally, it's just slap it on, but not too much at any one time. Sometimes I try and get it in the bottom of some of the texturing. Other times it's just flicking over the high spots. Someone asked me last weekend, do I have any hobbies? And I said, of course I do, wood turning. No, but that's your business. What else do you do for hobbies? Wood turning. Have you got nothing else? No, wood turning. My life does sort of revolve around it. But it's my that's how I earn my living. It's my job. My job is my hobby, and my hobby is my job. If I won the lottery and ended up with loads of money, would I still work? Well, I'll still be a wood turner. I may not be running around the country like an idiot like I do at the moment. but I will still certainly be doing wood turning. I'll just have a much nicer workshop with much nicer tools and toys, and most of them would probably just be covered in dust a lot of the time. But I will still do it because my past is a bit checkered. I still class myself as an alcoholic. I hadn't had a drink for over 25 years, but I still don't drink. I still class myself as an alcoholic. I used to do a lot of drugs. Ended up homeless on the streets. And people say, "Oh, you shouldn't tell people that." Well, I don't care, because quite frankly, if people want to judge me on my past, then they don't deserve to know me. So it sounds a bit arrogant, but I've helped a lot of people who have had problems. There's quite a big alcohol and drug sort of situation going on in lower stuff like most towns these days. And sometimes helps that someone can actually see there is life the other side of what they're going through. Sometimes can inspire them to actually do something about it. But yeah, I've done many things, and I was interviewed recently by a guy called Paul Heine, who used to do That's Life and the Country Life and stuff like that. Him and his wife came into the shop one day. His wife's Libby Purvis. She's on Radio 4 and writes for The Guardian, written numerous books and things. And they came in and met me in the shop one day. We had a chat about things and just got on really well with them. Not the sort of people I normally sort of mix with. I don't think I've ever listened to Radio 4, and I don't think I've ever read The Guardian. I think I've seen it in the paper shop once, but I don't do newspapers. But he said he turned up one day and said, "I want to do a little sort of interview thing with you, a little documentary." And I thought, why? He sent me a link to another one he'd done for somebody else. When I looked at this one, there's some bloke called Dennis King. I don't have a clue who he was. Turns out he wrote the theme tune to Black Beauty and about 400 other music scores for film and TV. He was sitting in a bar after just being on stage with Frank Sinatra, and Ella Fitzgerald walks up behind him and sits next to him on the lathe, and he's doing a duet with Ella Fitzgerald and things. And I'm going, this bloke is known like everybody. Why do you want to do me? He said, "I just find you interesting because of all the problems of your past, and you've come out the other side and stuff." So we've done this little documentary. He said, "Use it as you see fit, do whatever you want with it." He said, "I might sort of use it, a couple of my sort of things." He rang me up the other week and said, that's when I was in Germany doing the demonstrating out there. He rang me up. He said, "Where are you?" I said, "Frankfurt." He said, "Oh, I'm on the west coast of Ireland at a film festival." "All right, so why are you ringing me up?" He said, "Well, I've just shown your documentary at a film festival." That's what you get for being a cheapskate and trying to use gloves. I bought some spares. I normally forget the gloves and go home multicolored fingers and looking like someone really worrying. So yeah, apparently you're telling this video at this film festival on the west coast of Ireland, apparently really well-known film festival. And he said, "Oh, everybody said to you, you seem like a really nice guy." He said, "Obviously I denied that straight away." Thank you for that, Paul. So he said, whether I'll ever get picked up by TV or anything, who knows. So with this one, I could put it on with a brush, but I really need to dry brush it. So I literally want just a few little spots. That's what I'm going to do. Just put it on the palm of one hand, get a little bit on the glove, but literally a smear. I just want to just go over the top, just put some little highlights just on the highest points possible. I don't want too much on the glove, otherwise it'll push down into the lower parts of the texture. The first few I done, I used the gilt waxes. I don't use the chestnut gilt wax. I use Liberon, just up Liberon products in the shop, and I think the Liberon waxes are a much richer colour than the chestnut ones. I just find that little bit of this wax. This is the ivory, just on the high spots. It just seems to just lift some of them other colours a bit. You really need to get it in a nice bit of light. I can feel already that that's drying on my glove. when I first moved into my shop, I was fed up with people asking, what do you do? What are you going to be? What's it? And there's a pool in my shop, 2/3 of the way down. So I told everybody that was going to be, I was going to put a series of these poles all the way through the shop, like that one. They're all going to be polished up, and that's going to be a strip dance and pole dancing club. So obviously the word went round extremely quickly, and numerous council officials turned up and said, I need a license and this, that, and the other. So eventually I said, so that I'll actually just open I'll just set a lathe up in the shop. I've only been in there about 6 weeks, and I'm living above the shop, so I had to get lots of other things done. So I just set a lathe up, and I was doing some colouring and texturing through the local woodturners who knew me came in. But I went out lunchtime to just go and get a bite of food. There's a nice little deli place a couple of doors up. And I walked out the shop, and I'm quite used, because of my past, people sort of crossing the street when they see me coming and sort of looking at me down their nose. So I walked out of the shop, and people were going, looking at me like this as I walked past them. They just give me some strange looks. And I think, Christ, I know I've only been here like 3 or 4 weeks, but didn't half a chance to sort of get myself in the place. And I just assumed they were a very sort of cliquey newcomer. Thought nothing of it. Had my dinner, people in the shop gave me some funny looks. And then in the evening, about 6 o'clock, went upstairs, went in the bathroom, went to the toilet, went to the sink to wash my hands, looked in the mirror, and I had like a red stripe going up here, a blue one across there, some gold wax down here. It looked like a really bad David Bowie tribute act. And I hadn't done any colouring all afternoon. So I know I'd done that in the morning, so that's why everybody was looking. And then the news went round, there's some weirdo who bought the old bookshop. He came in the other day, he's got gold and purple around his fingers and stuff. And what the hell? I've just put melamine gloss lacquer. Another one of the chestnut products. I normally use the acrylic gloss lacquer. I normally put on about 3 coats on top of here to build up a real depth of shine. None of the ones over there have got 3 coats, but the ones I've been selling have 3 coats. I use this one in demos because this will dry in a couple of minutes, where the gloss lacquer ideally wants about 10, 15, 20 minutes between coats. So I literally just want to use a thin coat of that. That will just bind onto the surface, just to basically hold it all on there and hold it all together and stop it coming off. That'll give it a little bit of a shine, but nowhere near enough. I really want almost like a plastic layer, so it almost looked like it shimmers. So when you hold it in the light and move it around with enough coats of lacquer on it, it will actually shimmer. What I'll have to do with this when I get it back home in the workshop is I'll give it 2 or 3 more coats of the gloss lacquer, but then I'll return this bead and return the bowl that we'll have in the middle here, because they'll have an oil finish on it shortly. So I'm going to assume, I don't know what time do we finish and what time is it? Took my watch off. 10 to 10. Oh. So long have we got?
Sometimes we finish at 9:30.
Anybody got a ladder? I'll just turn that back a bit. Right.
You don't pay overtime.
So if anybody needs to disappear, I do get breakfast if I cook it myself and supply the sausages.
If you could finish for 10, that'd be nice.
Right, I'll do as quick as I can. Basically, I'll turn a bead on this outside edge. Sack this. Yep. No, it doesn't, does it? Join the club. I don't know either, but it works. Yeah, I use this is a water-based wax, which means it's acrylic anyway, basically. But I'll also use that, like the gold bowl and most of my wall hangings and things that are on there. They are wax products. Like the green and gold one is green verdigris wax, which is a normal wax base. The gold is an ordinary wax base. I'll spray 1 thin coat of gloss lacquer on the top. The solvents in it seem to soak into the wax and bind onto it. And then I put other coats over the top. It just seems to hold. It shouldn't work. It should react. It should peel off. I found with 1 light coat initially, which is soaked into the surface, it seems to work. And I've got customers who've had pieces 15, or not 15 years, I haven't turned 15 years, but probably 10, 11 years. And they've still got them on the wall and it's still as good as the day they got it. So it shouldn't work, I agree. But if you're careful and do thin layers, it does. So what I'll do is I'll just start the bead off on this edge. So again, exactly the same as I've done on the other side. Actually, all I'm going to do is just take off the colour and texturing bit. That we'll have to do. Inside here, there would be another bead. There's a problem when your hobby is also your job. You enjoy it too much and you can lose complete track of time. What I was saying earlier about my bevel indicating device, my bevel is pointing that direction. If I want to go in here with a 90-degree entry point, so I have a hemispherical bowl, my tool has got to start over there because that's the direction of my bevel. Can you see that in the camera? Yep. So that's where the bowl will have to, or my tool will have to start, and then I'll have to pull it around to 90 degrees at the bottom. So that's the tool travel with my handle from there to there. Also, I've got a shallow bowl. It might be from here to there. But stick a magnet on a piece of on a pencil. It's harder to lose. You don't drop it in the shavings, and every now and again, just remind yourself where your bevel's got to be before you start the process. Then if you've got proper bevel control, turns you in the piece of work and the bevel is rubbing. Use the wing of this one. There's that little pip bevel indicating device, or a flute rather indicating device. Come around your normal cut. As you get to it, lift the handle. Pip comes off. There's another fiver. All down to bevel. The bevel is the most important part of most of our wood turning tools. If you don't have the bevel contact, don't have correct bevel support, you're not going to be able to turn smoothly. Quite often we'll get that funny chatter. It tends to mean you come off the bevel and it's skipping around, making horrible noises and grinding because I haven't got bevel support. Find your bevel, find your cut. A bit of rain again. Right, not quite finished, but it'll have to do. We've got a couple of dents there where I've gone in too far, so I'll just have to probably flatten that down a bit more, and that bead will probably be just a bit more recessed. But basically, that'll then get braided oiled, same with this bead on the outside, just needs a little bit more refinement. Let someone turn the clock forward on me. So basically a coloured and textured bowl using the rainbow waxes. I'll stick it on the front here somewhere if you want to come and have a look. It might still be sticky, but it shouldn't be. Any questions?
Actually, once that's fully lacquered, do you then buff the surface of the lacquer?
No, because all you end up doing is putting the buffing compounds in the texturing.
Right.
If you just put 2 or 3 coats of like gloss lacquer over the top, it will come up to a really, really high shine.
Do you like it inside of that bowl?
No, that would be oiled. I always like a contrast between a contrast of matte finish and a shiny finish. So most of my bowls up there, the inside of the bowl is actually fairly matte. When I did lacquer, if I lacquer that when I get it home, I'll lacquer it, but then I'll have to return the bead and the inside of the bowl to take the lacquer off before I can oil it again. Any other questions?
Yes. I think that those of you who are guests and are new to Woodturning, you can see that there is an infinite variety of things which can be done. So members, I would say, have a go, be adventurous. You know, they are stunning. So have a go. Darren, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
A great evening, and you've opened our minds, I hope, to many other things.
Yeah, I apologise for it going on so long, but I was enjoying myself, so we overran.